Hello and happy Monday. I hope everyone is doing well and had a great weekend. Today, I want to talk a little bit about what the window of tolerance is in regards to mental health, and then a little bit about OCD as well. So, the window of tolerance is basically an idea created by Dr. Dan Siegel out of the UCLA School of Medicine. And basically, this window is a way to determine where someone's ability or how big of a scope that they have in terms of being able to tolerate or manage certain triggers, emotions, thoughts, feelings, situations, and things of that nature. So there's some great visuals. I have some links that I'm going to put below the video, much of which I got my information from, if I can say that correctly. So just want to give credit to those websites as well. So the window of tolerance, again, is a way to determine where someone is able to function in a way that's healthy and what are the signs of someone being outside of that scope. So the window of tolerance was created. And again, there's some great visuals, and I'll post a link to one of them below. But the window of tolerance basically is... Dan Siegel describes it as the optimal, well, these are kind of my words condensed, but an optimal arousal level in the nervous system, basically, okay? So it's an optimal level of arousal in one's nervous system where they're able to tolerate, to continue to function, to stay grounded, to stay in their bodies, so to speak, in regards to what is going on with them. When someone is outside of their window of tolerance, it means they're outside of that scope where they're able to act, process, and function things normally. So in the window of tolerance, or outside of the window of tolerance, I should say, is what is called hyperarousal and, hyper arousal and hypoarousal. So let's say that your window of tolerance is right here. Okay, hyperarousal would be up here, and visually speaking. Hypoarousal would be below. Hyperarousal is typically when someone is in a state of strong emotions or anxiety, and they maybe are having a panic attack or panic episode, and they're feeling very ungrounded in that way. That would be their nervous system in a hyperaroused state. Someone who is in a hypoaroused state is basically when someone is feeling shut down. If you've ever had times where you feel numbed out, you feel checked out, maybe dissociative or dissociation is what they call it. It's the opposite of being in a more of a anxious state or a strong emotional state. It's kind of more of like a shutdown state that someone is in. And that would be the hypoarousal, characteristic of hypoarousal. Now, both states are defense mechanisms that the nervous system is producing. Also with hypoarousal can come depression. Depression, sadness, again, that shutdown or dissociative feeling. And again, the hyper is sort of the opposite of that. So both of those are outside the window of tolerance, and that's how we can tell when someone is outside of their window of tolerance, is maybe when they're in either one of those states. Everybody's window of tolerance is different. Some of the things that can affect someone's level of tolerance or cause someone to have maybe a bigger window of tolerance or maybe a smaller window of tolerance is trauma. Depending on the level of someone's trauma or the way that they've been able to process or not process their trauma, that will many times determine how big or how narrow their window of tolerance is. Someone that has neurodivergent brain processes also tend to have more of a small window of tolerance. People with trauma, smaller window of tolerance. And it's because their defense systems are so high or they're so easily stimulated that they become anxious or they become shut down more easily, and they're more easily get outside of their window of tolerance because their window of tolerance is very narrow. And so part of the healing journey is being able to widen that window of tolerance for whatever the person's challenges are. Trauma typically entails, and even neurodivergency sometimes feels like a loss of control or powerlessness and trying to manage a world that is difficult for you to filter. Threat detection becomes primary in regards to trauma, and sometimes even in like neurodivergency and things like that, because they're trying so hard to manage what is taking place. Now, I'm sure there's other reasons someone can have a smaller window of tolerance, but those are just a couple of the reasons that I think are important to mention. So some of the ways that someone can get back into their window of tolerance. Now, I'm not going to give a huge plethora of ways to get back into the window of tolerance, but I'm just going to give a few examples. And some of those involve grounding exercises or what are called 5 senses exercises, things of that nature. So if someone is in a hypo aroused state, again, which is when they are more in the shutdown, numbing, or dissociative state, sometimes using more upbeat talk, higher energy talk, not out of control or anything like that, but things that try to get the person back up into a normal range of emotion and connectivity. Engaging the intellect, physical movement, things that could kind of spark one's energy a bit more are some things that can help someone get out of hypoarousal. For some people, even though this might be difficult when you're in more of a hypo-aroused state, is to be around people, be social. Sometimes that's the last thing your protector parts of you or protective system wants to do, but sometimes that's the best thing to do to help someone get a little bit more into their window of tolerance. So engaging socially, maybe doing something fun or something that stimulates the nervous system. For hyper arousal, when someone is up here and they're more having things like anxiety or strong emotional triggers or things of that nature, taking deep breaths, utilizing a soothing grounding tone, utilizing guided imagery, sometimes doing guided imagery or what is called the safe place exercise, where someone can get more into a safe place or feel safety. That can help maybe bring someone down a little bit more. Being in the present moment, reminding them, I know this might sound silly, but reminding them of their age, reminding them of who they are now, who their family members are, who their best friends are, describing things in your office, things of that nature, or your room. Those are things that can kind of help someone get back into their window of tolerance from a hyper aroused state. So again, more examples, those are just a few. And there are also ways not only to get someone back into their window of tolerance, but to help someone widen their window of tolerance. And that can be a slow process, but that's okay, because again, we're working with an overloaded nervous system. For whatever reason that person has an overloaded nervous system, that's what we're working on. And that can be difficult to get the mind and the body to trust that they can widen their window of tolerance. So some of the ways that you can help someone widen their window of tolerance is when they're finding themselves to be triggered, wanting to shut down, or feeling too stimulated in a way that's causing anxiety, is to have them practice mindfulness. Mindfulness, I feel like, is a really good tool to use. Now, some people get mindfulness and meditation mixed up together. Mindfulness is more of a way of being. Meditation is obviously an activity. Meditation can be considered a mindfulness activity, but that's not the only way to practice mindfulness. And maybe I'll do a video on mindfulness because I find it to be really effective. But practicing mindfulness can be a way to help someone start to slowly widen their window of tolerance when they're in an agitated state or a shutdown state. With OCD or other mental health related issues, learning how to sit with discomfort, learning how to sit with a level of discomfort, not exorbitant amounts of discomfort right away. Sometimes you want to stair step that and start small, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But letting people learn to trust themselves while sitting in a certain amount of discomfort and a certain amount of the trigger. In that way, they are teaching their nervous system that they're safe. Their nervous system, when it triggers them, they are typically, the nervous system is telling the person you are in danger, and it causes the person to go outside of their window of tolerance in either direction. But with learning how to sit with certain levels of discomfort, we teach the nervous system, we teach the mind, I think we teach the body and the spirit as well, that you can trust yourself in that situation and that you're going to be safe even though you're feeling a trigger. And that can help widen that window of tolerance a little bit more. Emotional check-ins. Where am I at right now? What am I feeling? Can I name what I'm feeling? And then doing something, addressing it accordingly, and trying it. It may or may not work. the first or the second or the third time, but sometimes we need to just practice things in order to create those new neural pathways. So one of the things that I think can be effective to use is what's called the emotion wheel. The emotion wheel is a really great wheel. You can find them online, and they help you identify not only the basic emotions, but some of the more intricate emotions. And just being able to name those can potentially help someone sit with that emotion, process it, and learn how to widen their window of tolerance a bit more. Maybe even using the emotion wheel to pick out an emotion that maybe you feel on a regular basis, not necessarily in that moment. I would suggest doing this in a more of a grounded state, but pick an emotion that you feel that you typically go outside of your window of tolerance in response to, and say, you know what, when this emotion comes up, I'm going to practice grounding myself. I'm going to practice mindfulness. I'm going to practice sitting in a certain level of discomfort. And that in itself, being able to maybe plan ahead how I can get out of my window, or I'm sorry, how I can get back into my window of tolerance. When we are in our window of tolerance, our nervous system, again, is at that optimal level. The prefrontal cortex is online. The cortex part of the brain is online. In internal family systems, we might call that being in the self. When we are in more of a dysregulated state, either hyper or hypo, we tend to be more in our limbic system, primal parts of our brains, where we are more kind of hunkered down for survival, whether it's anxiety or dissociation or whatever it might be. So when we get back into the window of tolerance, it means our cortex, our prefrontal cortex, is back online, so to speak. In IFS, you're back in the self. When you're outside of your window of tolerance in IFS as well, it might be that your parts are taking over and hijacking the system. As far as OCD goes, people with OCD, I feel like this can be effective. I know it can be difficult, but ways to increase the window of tolerance for someone with OCD, any mental health issue really, but in just kind of focusing on OCD is ERP and ACT, exposure and response prevention therapy, and acceptance and commitment therapy. Those can both help someone widen their window of tolerance. OCD is kind of connected to the neurodivergent world in a lot of ways, and having a bit of a neurodivergent brain or processing structures inside of your brain can be exhausting, and it can cause someone to really go outside of their window. So checking in, doing some of those activities that I had suggested, other activities as well. I know this isn't super comprehensive, but when you are overwhelmed, these are things that you could potentially do to help widen your window of tolerance, or at least get you back into your window of tolerance. So if I missed anything, let me know. I do hope that this is helpful for you, again, for OCD, but really any mental health issue, this can be important. And one of the following videos that I want to do will be on psychological flexibility and how that fits into the window of tolerance as well. So take care, God bless, and I hope you all have an awesome week. Bye-bye.